tuning into my Q&A this week. This is already the 20th Q&A, so that means that I've been doing this for the last 20 or so weeks. And it seems to be going really well. I get a lot of questions and a lot of feedback, and people are watching the videos, so that's very nice. And of course, as I always say, I kind of enjoy making them because it makes me think about things that I'm not usually thinking about from the questions that you guys are giving me. The questions I'm going to go over in this video are on dynamics. So how can you change the dynamics and the tone on a guitar, on an electric guitar in jazz, in the same way that horn players, probably especially saxophone players, do. I'm going to talk about arpeggios in positions, so a little bit about fingerings and some things to be aware of with that, and what options you have. I'm also going to cover some stuff on strumming in triplets, because that's actually quite useful to be able to do, even though there are not that many songs where you really need to do it, but there are a few styles where it's useful, at least, if not also common. And then a bit about the relative pitch, and whether that's useful, and maybe also a few ideas on how to develop it. So remember that if you have a question, because we need the questions of course to keep the Q&As going, then leave a comment on this video. It doesn't really matter what you want to know about, if it's about gear or music in general, like theory, what to listen to, stuff like that. Or if you have ideas for stuff I should include. Should I include something like a weekly recommendation, for instance? I think Sean Daniel calls it listening homework. That could be something to do, would be fitting with the lesson theme of my channel. So yeah, let me know what you think, and let's get to the questions. I have a question about using dynamics with the guitar. When I listen to horn players, specifically saxophones, I notice they can really alter and change their dynamics and tone altogether to create more colorful and emotional lines, and create great contrast with their solos as a whole. I tried to emulate this feeling with my playing and found that when I try to play softer, it comes off as too quiet, and when I try to play more aggressively and hard, I can't really pull that off either. Any tips? So it's true that in jazz the guitar has a lot less dynamic range and a lot less options tonally than something like a horn player, like a saxophone or a trumpet. The same of course goes for other instruments like piano and double bass. Also there they have less options, and then what we can do instead is often that we can play more notes at a time. So that's one way. I think you see that really clearly how somebody like Wes Montgomery really uses that to make build-up in his solo. So the cliche Wes Montgomery solo build-up, which is in most of his solos, is really like single note lines, octaves, chords. And that way he's just adding more notes and getting more energy into to the solo and making sort of a development. And he does that on almost all his solos, if he doesn't start with octaves, I think. So that's how it is, and for piano players it's the same. So it can be useful if you want to check that out, to just check out, well, what do piano players do, and at the same time of course you want to emulate the horn players. So in jazz, I think it's been sort of the idea that the jazz guitar was something you played with a clean amp, with the neck pickup, and no effects, and that's been sort of the main idea for a long time about how jazz was played. And maybe that's not entirely true as to how it was, because if you listen to people like Kenny Burrell or the earlier West recordings, then I think you were actually hearing like a tube amp that's turned up so loud that it is sometimes overdriving and compressing a bit. So that, I think that's actually somewhat of a misunderstanding, but it has been really sort of the way people did it, also because they were practical. They would fly places to do gigs and then just plug into like a mixer when they were performing. Like Joe Pass has some records where he's just plugged into the mixer on a live concert and stuff, and it sounds horrible. Actually, I mean, compared to how he sounds when he has a really good amp and stuff like that. But so there was a period where people were really doing that, and I think it's just more about being practical actually than anything else. And of course we just relied on it. And also I think the language for hard bop is, in there it's a little bit more okay to just sit well in the groove, and then you don't have to be so dynamic. I think also if you listen to Sonny Stitt or Hank Mobley, they are a lot less wild dynamically than, well, actually somebody like Parker, or also Coltrane, or Joe Henderson, or people that were later. So there's also sort of a connection to where the guitar came into play in jazz history, and how that sort of stayed affecting the way we play it. Of course, I'm just sort of explaining my point of view on this, but you could be that you're not agreeing with me. But so that's something that's colored the way we play jazz, and that has also been a limiting factor in my opinion. And then since the late 60s through the 70s, you had sort of a whole fusion and jazz rock thing, and it kind of split up. So they kind of went their own way, and then there was not so much. It was like you were one or the other. You weren't really doing both for a very, or at least that was the case for most artists. But since then, you still have like then the tonal range of the guitar started to sort of grow. I think from the 80s on, especially with the people who really sort of embraced effects in certain ways and tried to use those in a more creative way, and also I think lending ideas from rock music. So for me, I would say that the people that I think of with this would be like Pat Metheny and John Scofield, and also later Kurt Rosenwinkel, and also Bill Frisell, Mike Stern. So you have people who would use effects to add that sort of excitement, and I think those are the people that you want to look for recordings of, and then see what you sort of can come up with and what works. Because I mean, you can of course do the West thing, and that always works, and it's good, but it's also tied to a certain type of music. It's not going to do well in an open bossa nova or something like that. So there you don't really have those kind of things. And then you have other things. So for me, I think the use of effects and also really making use of the amp and using that wall is something that's important, and that didn't become practical until quite late, probably. And but now it's really, I think it's really a part of jazz. And I think the sort of the array of the range of sounds that are sort of acceptable within jazz is a lot wider now. So yeah, so there are two things. So there's how you use the amp, and then there's how you use effects. So if you say in your comment that when you play quiet it's too quiet, and then it's also a problem when you play hard, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what happens when you play hard really, but if you say that it's too quiet when you play quiet, then probably what's happening is that your amp is not compressing enough. That can be a few things. That can be that it's an amp that you need to turn up more. If it's a tube amp, then usually if you turn it up enough and find the right balance between if it has a master volume, then the right balance between master volume and input gain. If I'm sitting in front of an amp, then master volume is usually here and the input gain is there. That's why I'm doing that. So that's something to experiment with. That can help you get the amp to compress a bit more, and if it compresses more, then that means that it will pull up when you play softer, and it will also limit a little bit more and probably overdrive a little bit if you play harder. And that's already going to give you some sort of difference in sound, and in many ways quite similar to saxophone, I think. So that's for the amps. I think this aspect of playing that you have the amp that's sort of on the edge of the breakup, and that you can sort of push the amp just with your technique into overdrive, is something that I use a lot when I chose my setup. I was going for that. That's also why I'm playing a modeling amp, because I can sort of get the good sound of a tube amp without having to have a tube amp, and also because I can get the good sound of a tube amp that's turned up to 10. Because most of the time I'm playing on a twin amp, Fender Twin, that's turned up to all the way. And doing that in real life is just never going to happen. I'm never going to play a concert where I'm going to do that. Purely for the reason that it's going to be so loud on stage that even if the room is big enough, then it's going to be unbearable on stage. So, but it still sounds great. So you still want to do it, and with a modeling amp, you can turn it up and then turn down the volume of the modeler, and then it still feels the right way. So to explain, I don't know, the camera mics will probably pick up my acoustic sound as well, and maybe it's going to disguise how it works, but I'm just going to try anyway. So the idea is then that you have a dynamic range, and if I play really soft, of course it gets louder, but also not only does it get louder, the change in volume is actually not that big compared to the difference in how hard I pick. And at a certain point you can also hear it really changes the sound and starts to overdrive. And that means that I have like clean, and I can also bite a bit more. And of course, I think the easiest way to demonstrate this in this setting, because I'm not playing that loud in this room, is to play chords, because then you can really hear like that I'm hitting the amp hard. You can get that effect in the amp. For my taste, it sounds the best if you get it in the amp. But you can also use a compressor pedal to sort of pull up the lower sounds. Or you can also do this if you have an overdrive pedal, use that as a boost, and then turn down the master volume on the amp, and then hit the input gain kind of hard with the pedal, so that the front end of the amp is being pushed, and the preamp is sort of forced to compress the signal. It depends on the amp, really, how well it sounds, and you have to find sort of a right combination of amp and pedal, really. And also you have to experiment with what works in terms of EQ and stuff. It's without knowing what is what, I can't really explain how to do it, I think. For me, with this setup, it's like I'm not even sure what pedal I'm using. But I think, yeah. So that's like a tube screamer pedal into a twin, essentially, and the idea is then that it's pushing, especially the mids of the guitar, and cutting away highs and lows, and then pushing that into the amp, and that's giving the sound, and that's also giving it the dynamics on it. So that's sort of the amp and that part of the gain thing that will give you a bigger range. This may or may not work with the style of music you play, because if you're playing more hard bop and stuff, then this is not going to be really a part of it. You know, this is not. You don't hear this really happening with Joe Pass or Jimmy Rainey or something. So if that's what you're doing, then that's not so much of an option. But then there's also the thing that in that style the guitar is just dynamically not really working like that. It's a different ball game. It's a different genre. The other thing that you can do is also, of course, to have different things, is to use different registers. So I guess if you're a bit conscious about when you're soloing, that you use a certain register at a certain time. So I will end my solos high, and I will start them in the middle, and I might go low, or maybe I'll start them low, and I might also go low and use sort of the range of what I'm playing as a tool dynamically, because that's also a way of adding contrast. Really what you're looking for here is just adding different contrasts, and that's going to give the impression of the dynamic and the change of energy. I think, at least, that's so that means that you can do stuff. I don't know if I can do this. Sometimes I do this. It's not something I do really a lot. But if you have a piece where you can get away with using sort of the McCoy Tyner sound. So what I mean by that is McCoy Tyner will play stuff and then he'll like add like a low power chord or a low octave or a low fifth in the left hand, and then keep it really low and then go like this kind of sound, right? And that can work, you know, on guitar. Of course on piano you can leave it hanging, but stuff like that will actually add sort of, the contrast will just add some energy. Those kind of things you can start thinking of. Another thing you can think of is also how you might add delay. So I have my delays. I use delay in all my sound, and right now it's actually turned off, but I have it on an expression pedal so I can turn it off, on and off while I'm playing, and also gradually. And that means that is, I think I use it a little bit as a compensation. So when I play up there, the high register is going to sound a little bit thinner. So if I add the delay, it's going to fill up the sound a bit more. And I think those are the kind of things that I do in my playing if I have to analyze them. And of course you can go further. I think it's difficult to have like effects that you turn on and off within a solo. Usually that's hard to really pull off in a way that sounds nice. But you do have examples of it. Mike Stern might kick in distortion at some point in his solo, for instance. Don't think I really ever heard Schofield do it, but I think Schofield is also one of these guys who plays sort of the amp where it's like you can do this and you can do this, you know, and he messes a lot with different pickups and uses that. I don't know how much he does that within one solo, but of course making different sounds and different solos is also something that's useful for your playing. So that's those are also things you can think about. I think it's a little bit about taking the instrument seriously and also taking effects seriously, and also being aware that it's something, if you want to work with effects, you need to sort of develop the technique to use them and not just think like, okay, it's gonna sound different if I stomp on this, because it has to all sort of make sense. But then you can do a lot of stuff, and I think, well, yeah, so as I already mentioned, like Schofield, Frisell, Pat Metheny, Kurt Rosenwinkel, actually also Gilad Hexelman does this, and Lionel Dueke are also people who will use effects in that way, where I think that they, up to my taste, get away with it and really can add something. So that's a really long answer and talk about effects and stuff like that. I hope you can use it. I think it's an interesting subject because I'm kind of happy that the tonal range of jazz guitar has developed a bit from what it was when I was in school, and that there's just been more like, okay, you can actually put something in between the guitar and the amp and use that. I think it's given much more color to the expressions that you can get out of a guitar, and I think that's a very good thing. But at the same time, I also recognize the fact that if you want to play hard bop, you probably don't want to do it really. Like you might have a little bit of reverb, but that's about it. So yeah, good luck with it, and feel free to ask again if you have more questions about this. It's a very interesting topic. Also, if other people who, because this is, I mean, we all deal with these things. What do you think? Is this like jazz guitar is guitar, cable, amp, or do we need to put all the effects that we can find and turn them all on in between? So let me know what you think. Playing arpeggios consistently with 3 notes per string scales present opportunities for quite a few different fingerings and shift points, sometimes differing when ascending versus descending. Are there standard fingerings that may represent a rational starting point for arpeggios? What specific fingerings do you use and why? So 3-note per string scales and arpeggios. I guess it's true that there are like a lot of different fingerings that you can use for playing arpeggios. So maybe just to sort of make it a bit more specific, if I take this position of a C major scale, so a 3-note per string would be this, and if I have to play a C major 7 arpeggio in this position, then that could be something like. And of course it's true that, well, for the biggest part of this there's not going to be too much to talk about. I think whenever you have these sort of stretched out fingerings in the 3-note per string system, then you kind of make a choice and you try to make the stretch on this side of the hand or on this side of the hand, and then you just look at, well, which one do I choose so that I have to make the least positional changes. Like, I wouldn't say that this would make too much sense, because if I spread it out like this, I have to change position 3 times when I'm going up, and then doing this spread from the beginning means that I only change once when I get to the top strings. So if you choose that in this case, then you can do all of the different scales with only one position change, and I think that's the most efficient. That is what I would teach, at least. For the rest, I think that it's difficult to really hammer away at having one right way of doing fingerings, because you have to play the notes in different contexts, and it really is depending on the context how you're going to play them. And also another thing is that when I'm looking as a teacher, when I'm looking at a student, I'm actually choosing the fingering and the way he will solve certain parts of this, and I'm choosing that depending on how he or she plays, because for instance, I learned classical guitar first, which meant that the whole idea of laying over like this was not something that we were kind of allowed to do, and it was not something that I did, and I was used to working my way around that. And I was also just not very good at it because I never did it. So I always had solutions where I would do. And that's okay. I mean, that's one option. It works. There's nothing wrong with it. But when I look at a student and he or she may well do this, and then if they will naturally. I think I use the arpeggios in that way more as an opportunity for them to figure out what technique fits to them, and realize that a little bit by themselves, because I think that's important. I don't think I want to sort of teach them arpeggios and then like the arpeggios themselves and playing with them is already a lot of information. If you also have to sort of make all these strict rules about fingerings, that's going to be too much, and it's probably not going to be that useful anyway. So I tend to sort of push that a little bit more on the student to choose whatever works, and then hopefully also develop the ability to be a little bit flexible with their technique, because that's what you need in the long run. That's what you always need. You need to have a technique that's sort of as flexible as possible, and I think with this sort of laying it down and setting up rules is going to overcomplicate it, and it's also going to actually work against you in the long run, or for the student if you're teaching. So yes, so I tend to not do that. So for me it's not important that it's consequent. It doesn't have to be the same way up and down. I probably don't play them the same way actually when I practice them. I can play them in different ways, and I will do different things. And the way I do it now is different from what I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. If I knew them, no, I didn't know them 20 years ago. So yeah, so 20 years ago, I didn't know them. 15 years ago is different from 10 years ago. It's different from 5 years ago. It's okay. It changes. I think technique is something that it's good to keep it open-ended in that way. And not to have too many sort of things that you're stuck on. So I think it's more about if you're looking at it as a teacher, because the later comment Ron made, it seemed like he was thinking of it as a teacher. So that's why I'm saying it like that. And if you're thinking about it like that, then it's up for you to help the student choose the right technique, and also to be aware of what technique will fit the student, I think. And I think that's your job as a teacher, to realize what works the best, and then you just need to make a note of it, I guess, if you need to remember it. Usually you can just see what they are doing anyway. And it's only if they're really working against themselves that there's a problem. Another thing that is also important with these things, with 3-note per scale things, because very often, as soon as we start talking about something like technique, then it becomes about speed and efficiency very quickly. And I think these arpeggios in positions are not about speed and efficiency in that respect, because I think they're about overview. It's not important that you can play a multi-octave C major 7 arpeggio in the 5th position very fast, because that's not what you're going to be doing. If you want to play it really fast, you would move your hand and take another position where it's easier to play it fast, probably. I think it's about overview in this case, and as long as you can play it slowly and legato, then it should be. And legato, I mean just that you can play it without doing this, or so it has to be in time and it has to connect. And it doesn't have to be any faster than this, as far as I'm concerned, really. Because the point of the arpeggios in the positions is that you can find the chord notes of that chord in the scale in this position. So the execution is in that way maybe a little bit less important, because that's not what you need. You don't need these arpeggios for lines, really. I mean, you need parts of them, but then figure out an easy way to do that that fits with the rest of what you're playing in that situation, because that's what you really have to do anyway. And I think it's also, if you look at your own playing, at least if I look at my own playing, I choose different techniques all the time. I'm very inconsequent in terms of how I approach things technically, and I actually think that's a good thing. So it's about being open-ended and making the route between what you think and what you hear and what you play as short as possible, and that means that you just have to let go of it. So in this case with the arpeggios, because I don't think that's gonna be technically about speed, then it's like play it slowly, and then just don't expect people to play this in tempo 200 in 8 notes. It is not needed, really. It's possible, but it's not what you need to do. And for the rest, just try and see if you can find the technique that works the best for you right now, and be aware of the fact that is quite likely something that's going to change along the way, which is a good thing, in my opinion. I love the funky syncopation. Thank you for the lesson. How do you strum in triplets, particularly at faster tempos and when switching back to quarter note strumming? I'm finding it relatively simple to play triplet rhythms when going through single notes, but strumming is proving difficult. The movement of my arm keeps interfering with my sense of timekeeping, and I keep losing my place in the beat. Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked the segment on the funk strumming and how that's useful for learning to feel subdivision and work with rhythms. It's also just fun to do. I like to play those types of rhythms myself, because I think it's just nice to feel how you lock in with a groove and how you sit in a rhythm section. So Stu, I understand why you would say you would like that. So I'm going to read into your question a bit, because you talk about how you lose your sense of the beat when you're strumming triplets, and it seems as if you're going back and forth between, well, quarter note strumming would be so just something that's divided in two, so 8 notes or 16 notes, and then triplets. And of course, that's anyway difficult to make that change. But the thing with losing your beat is probably because you're used to your strumming being even, and because that's the problem with triplet strumming is that it's also not that common. It's not something that you'll have a few examples of. There's like a Stevie Wonder tune called Wall of the Nile, I think, is in triplet strumming. And then there are a few other things, like if you play a reggae in a triplet subdivision, you can use triplet strumming. If you want to play sort of some of the Afro-Cuban stuff, then you can do it as well. Those are sort of the places where I've come across it, and that's where I use it. And I guess I don't really go back and forth so much. I think if I have to sort of play a triplet rhythm, well, I don't know, it's very rare that I have to strum something and then all of a sudden play triplets. If I'm reading something in a big band chart, and because the only place where I can sort of think of where I'll have that is if I'm reading a big band chart and it will have suddenly a triplet rhythm. And I probably I wouldn't like strum it then. But I don't know. So it's hard for me to really understand where you have that. But if we just look at like how do you then get rid of sort of the fact that you get lost when you're strumming triplets. I think the main thing is that you really need to get used to, and you probably need to just practice that slowly. So if this is a beat, and then strum in 8-note triplets. And just to get used to the fact that on the 1 it's a downstroke, but on the 2 it's an upstroke. I think that's what's sort of getting in the way. I remember finding that really difficult when I learned to strum in triplets, and as I said, it's something I don't do really a lot. But what you can do is, so of course, do what I just did as an exercise, just like play the clicks and then emphasize the beat. And then you can just do sort of, there are a few different rhythms that you might as well play like this. There's one Afro-Cuban rhythm that's sort of a clave, a 6/8 clave or a 12/8 clave. When I learned it a long time ago, it was called Nanigo. I've also seen it as a Bembe, I think. Actually, if anybody knows the real name of this rhythm, then that would be useful, because right now I'm confused about whether it's one or the other, and whether Nanigo is something people made up when they told me about it, because it's so long ago. So, but if you check out the Drum Genius app, then there's in the Afro-Cuban section, there's like a Bembe something, and that'll have that as a cowbell pattern. So that would be this. And you will hear that very often. If you tell a drummer, a jazz drummer, to play something in 12/8, then that's gonna be his bell pattern probably. So the cymbal pattern, or he'll put it on the snare or as a click. Or there are a few options in terms of how they do this, but that pattern should, or variation on it will be in there. So that's a good one to know anyway, and that also just opens up for a lot of like. But as you can tell, like now I'm just when I'm just sort of adding chords now, I stop strumming and then I'm just, because in this tempo you can actually get away with like. So probably that's the approach that I will be doing if I had in the middle of a triplet pattern. I will probably play it all down. And think of James Hetfield, because he can play everything with downstrokes really fast or something. I don't know. It's if you know the rhythm and you know what it sounds like, then executing it should be okay. And you don't need to like start changing the strumming, because I don't know. There's something in me that gets very careful about having the idea that that you have to change the basic subdivision of a piece. If I'm strumming something, then that's going to be the basic subdivision of a piece, and to really go to another subdivision and change the strumming seems kind of radical to me. Then I would just stop strumming and then just know what the rhythm sounds like and then play it like that. I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense what I'm saying right now, even to me, but I think that's actually how I would handle it. So that's of course the best I can do with it. And oh yeah, and but just to work, so it's anyway going to be useful to work on the triplet strumming. You know, that's nice. The other rhythm that I actually use it for is triplet reggae. So if you have like a slow I use it for that quite often, and that's also just a good way to connect with triplets. And it's also nice to notice how you can reinterpret triplet-based music into a lot of different things. So you can look at a triplet-based piece and go, well, it's in 3/4, or it's in 6, or it's a reggae, or you know, there are all these different things that you can sort of put in terms of rhythmical interpretations of how the subdivision is sort of grouped and how it's going to sound, and you can mix them. That can be a nice effect also, if you do it well. But and like the reggae thing, we use that once in a while, I think, when you're jamming a medium swing piece, for instance, because you can go there if you want to. It's not, if you do it all the time, it's going to sound horrible, but once in a while it can work. And you can of course also just choose to play pieces as a reggae, if you want to take the A train as a reggae, for instance. How useful do you think having relative pitch is, and how do you develop it? Cheers. So relative pitch is of course the ability to hear notes and harmonies relative to something else, so that you can identify what it is and what is being played or sung, or and it's an important skill to have, that you have some sort of concept of that, and that you can hear what's going on around you when you're playing. Especially if you're a guitar player and you're playing behind somebody and you have to play the right chords. So if you're playing on C7 and somebody's really emphasizing in their solo the 13th, the B, and then you don't want to play the C right next to it high in the chord, because it's going to clash. So you need to be able to hear that that's the note that they're playing, or you need to be able to hear that they're playing an altered chord, for instance, and then play that, and those kind of things. It's very simple, sort of practical ways that you need to be able to adjust as well as possible. And of course that means that you have to know it so well that you can react on that without having to think about it. You do not have time to really analyze it and then react to it. Then you're going to be too late. That's always going to be the case. So yeah, so keep that in mind as why you want to learn it. I think it's very practical, and it's also going to help you sight reading. So if you have to read something and you are used to hearing the music in your head before you have to play it, then that makes it easier for you to actually make music when you're sight reading something. That can also be, if not essential, because there are not that many places where you actually have to sight read stuff as a guitarist, I think, but it's very useful, and it's going to help you learn things off paper a lot quicker and make music out of whatever it is you have to play, that you have to read. And you're never going to be able to do that with tabs. You need real music for that, not music notation, not tabs. Yeah, so those are some of the things that you need it for, and that it's useful for. And it's also going to help in your ability to hear something and then play it, and also the ability to sort of connect between what you hear in your head and then what's coming out of your fingers on the guitar, because that's also something that you need to develop over time. This is not, it's a part of it, it's not everything, because there are people who have really good ears but who don't really have that at all, who don't develop the ability to sort of create beautiful lines. You can have good ears without being a good musician. That's quite possible. So yeah, So okay, so in terms of developing it, singing is good. So for me, when I was in the conservatory, I was working on that every day, pretty much. So that would mean most weeks, 7 days a week, for I don't know, half an hour to an hour. And what you need to do is find easy classical pieces that are simple, because what you want to develop is, of course, everything is relative to a key in most music that you have to play, so you might as well just develop your ability to hear keys as much as possible. And you start with a major scale because that's the easiest. And what you do is you find these, I'm sure you can find them also for free on the net, or probably, but you can find like pieces that you have to sing, that you can sing like short classical pieces with simple melodies, and you just play like the tonic or a cadence in that key, and then you just try and sing the piece, and you have to learn to hear the notes relative to a key, to the root of the key, so that you really hear the root as sort of as the gravity of the whole piece, because that's a little bit how root fools. And then so work on that a lot. Also just until it gets easy. You can also just write out like random numbers and then use those as scale degrees, and then sing those within an octave. That's also a good exercise. Another thing that I did a lot was I used a computer program that they had at the conservatory, and that was an ear training program called Earmaster that I would spend I don't know how long on it, but like 5-10 minutes a day for I think a year or two, for sure, just to get quicker at hearing intervals or hearing scales and chords and melodies and stuff like that, just to train it really and get more used to it. You should check out that program. It's a fairly decent program. It's also not that expensive. They actually approached me to do a demo for them a year ago, I think, 1.5 years ago. But I'll link to the program in the description. You can check it out. So that can be a worthwhile investment for this. But I wouldn't do that. Well, it could be that actually the program has developed so many times that it's now including the singing thing also. I don't know, but I wouldn't only do the computer program, even though that might seem easier. I think the singing is stronger. So for that reason, I would say maybe start with that and then add the computer program along the way, or be aware of the fact that you want to do both for sure. So that's it. Like, it's an important skill. It's not something that I'm so specialized in and that I'm doing here on this channel so much, but there are other channels that do this, I'm sure. I cannot imagine that there are not. And it is a very fundamental way. And it's also a very nice way to just get really into sort of the basics of the theory, and if you're already able to play, you can sort of find another way to learn to connect with the theory, if that's a problem anyway, of the music by using that when you're reading and doing ear training. I think that's at least also a bit of what I've used it for. Yeah, so if you're not working on developing your relative pitch, you probably should. That's it for the questions this week and the answers. As always, if you have a question, if you have something that you want to hear my opinion on, whether it's silly or whether it's some serious stuff or gear, music, solos, artists, whatever, let me know in the comments or connect with me on social media and ask me there. So Facebook, Google+, Instagram, Twitter. For the rest, I didn't get to, I think I talked about that in a Q&A 2 weeks ago, that I'm thinking about moving my website to another company because it's a little bit sketchy with my company, that the web hosting that I'm at now, that the website crashes quite often, and it does seem to sort of have something to do with our servers more than it has to do with my website. So I didn't get to move it yet because I've been busy, but I think it's likely that I will within the next week or so. If my website is suddenly down because of that, well, you can probably, if you were connected with me on social media anywhere, then I'll post about it there when it's moved also. Also just because I want to have some feedback on if it gets better, if it starts loading a little bit faster or stuff like that. Because I think I have the impression that it loads kind of fast if you're in Europe right now, and then the States and Asia and Russia gets more and more difficult, and I've had some reports that people couldn't open it at all for a whole week in the States and stuff. So I'm curious if that's going to get better, because of course the idea is that people can reach the website. That's why it's there. Yeah, so that's a little bit sort of on another music related thing that I'm sort of checking out. But it's also always nice to sort of ask you guys about it, because you're more prone to leave an opinion and give me some feedback on it. So that's why I'm also asking here at the end of the Q&A. For the rest, if there's something in all the questions that I covered today, because a lot of this time was really subjective also, with my view on effects and my experiences with arpeggio fingerings and stuff like that. So if you have an opinion on this, then I think it's a good idea that you share it with us, because I'm at least looking for input, that's for sure. So that's very welcome. And I'll link to the Earmaster ear training program in the description as well. You can check that out if you don't know it. It could be something that you find useful. So that's it for this week. New lesson on Thursday, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.